Hello everyone, this is Joseph Osco with A&P's podcast for today, February 15th, 2014. As you can see, my co-host, Mr. Frank Ocanati, is not with us today. He regrets that he was unable to make today's show. He's otherwise engaged in some meetings with an elected official on one of his political initiatives here in Cook County, Illinois. You can also see I'm here with last week's guest, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, our guest from our last show, retired Sergeant Detective Don Herion with the Chicago Police Department's Vice Squad. Thanks for being with us again today, Mr. Herion. And to my left, we have a new guest who will be known as Mr. Harvey. Mr. Harvey, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
For those of you who are wondering who Mr. Harvey is, Mr. Harvey has worked under the umbrella of the Chicago outfit for a vast number of years in the Chicagoland area, primarily in the Chicagoland area, as involved in their gaming enterprises, sports betting, basically, and has some very interesting things in his resume. In addition to his good work, I feel awkward saying good work, I should say hard work, for the Chicago outfit, Mr. Harvey was also well acquainted and involved in legitimized gaming with a few legitimate gaming icons, if you will. Care to shed some light on who those people were, since most of us know who the Chicago outfit is?
Oh, it's Bobby Martin. Bobby was one of the original line makers, was in charge of Churchill Allen's race book in Las Vegas. Johnny Quinn, another in the same category. And another one was North Swanson. North was so talented, he used to make the line on approximately 500 horses based on their breeding line for the Caliente future book on the Kentucky Derby. Once a horse reached 2 years old, they were eligible. He used to study bloodlines and everything. So these three between them had an excellent resume as far as knowledge in the gaming industry. Bob Martin taught me things that,
Give us one example.
One example, I said to Bob, I says, how do you justify when somebody comes in and makes you a big bet when you move the line? And Bob would say to me, he says, I learned many years ago that I book by face. And that was a strange answer. What do you mean you book by face? Bob says, well, if this fella comes in and bets me $50,000 on the Bears over the counter, he says, I take a look at him, and you walk in and bet $500 on the game. Well, you're a Sharpie in my eyes. You know the lines. You know when my line is short or heavy or one thing. The other one's betting his hometown team and so on. Sentiment. He says, I give no regard to it. You come in and bet me $500 on a game, I'm running around looking, checking every line and seeing where there's loopholes, and I'm going to adjust it from there.
Sure. And so the difference there is there are bettors that are just genuine fans as opposed to professional bettors or businessmen.
90% of the people are professional fans.
I would imagine. Yeah.
You've got 10% of the people who shop and look for the best line, and they have some sort of advanced knowledge or information. They won't make a bet. They're not there to make a bet for recreational purposes.
I see. And if I just may put on the table, the two of you are acquainted and have been for, I think you may have arrested Mr. Harvey at some point in his career. Was it more than 20 years ago, or more than 30 years ago, or? You remember?
Probably around 30 years ago.
Around 30 years ago.
I had hair at that time.
And, So, Don, did you, obviously you have a cordial relation with him today, and with your serious anti-organized crime, corruption history, I would assume somewhere along the line, this Mr. Harvey, you found the error of your ways, or you're no longer involved in the Chicago outfit. I would
Not
hope.
at all.
That probably helps you
Yes.
move forward with him
Yes.
as an
Yeah.
acquaintance or friend.
Yeah, well, we've been friends for a long time.
Good, good. It's good to see that.
Yeah,
The good guys and the bad guys sometimes,
well, it's not a hatred thing,
it's business.
Yeah.
He
You
was
have a
doing
job.
a job and I had a job, that's
Yeah.
all.
Yes. It's very interesting.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
more or less.
I suppose that not all of your former defendants or whatever you would refer to, people like Mr. Harvey, would be as cordial with you if they had a chance to see you in public.
I've checked underneath my car on numerous occasions to look for any strange object that may be
I would imagine.
attached.
Would it be appropriate for me, and you don't have to answer, I'm wondering, do you carry a firearm today?
Wouldn't leave home without it.
Really?
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you have that piece of machinery to protect
Yeah,
you.
it's a good feeling there.
Sure, I can imagine. Sometimes I wish I had the opportunity that you
You
had.
can now, all
Well,
you have to do is apply.
Well, there's, we'll look into it, but
Yeah.
Mr. Harvey, what are you doing with yourself these days? You just a retired
Retired, enjoying life.
individual? Yes, good for you. Married or?
No, my wife passed away.
I see. I'm sorry to hear that. And any children?
I've got one boy in California.
Is he in the gaming business?
Not at all, hates gaming.
Okay.
He's a computer nerd.
All right, good for him. Bill Gates is a computer
Right.
nerd too. And now, going back to your history in gaming, your occupation or career, if you will, any interesting situations? I heard somewhere, and I could respect if you don't want to go into too many details, because I understand you're in negotiation to be marketing some of your information, and you don't want to give it away here. But whatever you think you might be willing to discuss, just short of giving away something that you'd like to market at some point, you had some exposure to people tightly affiliated with outfit boss who was based out of Miami, Florida, Santo Traficante, maybe indirectly, as it may have applied to certain gaming issues on various Super Bowls and different controversies on various Super Bowls with different individuals.
No, there were no controversy on Super Bowls.
Okay, thanks for the correction.
There may have been controversies on certain games,
I see.
which there was advance information on,
Mhm.
and the thoughts were.
Would these be playoff games, or just?
No, just regular
Okay,
season.
thanks for the
games.
correction.
And there was a lot of thoughts as to them having certain judges and referees in their pocket, as far as having the outcome of the game predetermined. And I got in touch with some of these games, and over a period of a year, I was given 9 games. Out of the 9 games, there were 8 winners. No losers, by the way.
This is all pro.
This was all pro NFL. There was one game which I was given the team on a Tuesday and called up Thursday and told not to bet the game. And if I did bet the game, lose the juice and bet the other way, because they just got a call that their referee is sick and not going to be working that game. Now, this is knowledge that nobody has. the referees are not even, their assignment is not made available to the public till the day of the game. And here I'm getting a call on a Thursday to get off of the game.
I see.
I don't know how knowledgeable, and this is the last I'm going to discuss this, but I don't know how knowledgeable you are in football as far as the calling of plays or anything else. But the first game I
Somewhat
got,
knowledgeable.
well, the first game I got there were two teams. One team was the 6.5 point favorite. And it happened at a time that I was financially embarrassed. And somebody came up to me, very knowledgeable, and he told me, he says, Harv, he says, bet as much as you want to win on the game. Bet Team X and give 6.5 points. Well, I bet it not for that much. I probably had 200, 300, 400 on the game. I watched the whole game, and with approximately 14 seconds left in the game, my team was on the opposing team's 6-yard line. Score was tied. There's 14 seconds left. My team lines up for a field goal. They kick the field goal, they're going to make it. They're going to win the game by 3, and of course I'm going to lose my bet. I gave 6.5 points. So I'm screaming, and luckily nobody was home at the house because I almost put the shoe through the television. I says, you did it one more time, you listened to somebody. I walked into the washroom and the television was going loud. And on the television I heard Howard Cosell screaming. It was a Monday night game, by the way, and he and Frank Gifford, and Don Meredith were the 3 announcers. Howard Cosell screaming, he says that's the worst call I've ever heard in the history of football. Well, I went in and they're showing replays of the call and everything. They called roughing the kicker. But meanwhile, the field goal was good. The team I bet on was up by 3. There's 14 seconds left in the game. Rule of thumb is you very rarely ever take points off the board once you get them. And here there's 14 seconds left in the game. The time's going to expire. They're going to win by 3. But they turned down the field goal, moved the ball to the 4-yard line with 14 seconds left, and ran a running play. If they don't make the 4 yards for a touchdown, game's over. They lose the game. There was no need to run that play. And but then again, they don't cover the spread if they don't make the touchdown.
That's the.
He ran right through the right guard position or something, and he walked right into the end zone. And Howard Cosell said, well, there goes the line. And that was the end of that situation.
I presume you're not going to tell us what game that was, or is that all right?
Well, I'm not going to tell you the year. I can tell you the game.
Okay.
The right side was Washington.
Okay.
The wrong side was the New York Giants.
Interesting.
I'll tell you the next game.
Yes.
And that's it. The next game was Pittsburgh and Houston.
Mhm.
And I don't remember what who the favorite was in the game. If I'm not mistaken, Houston was the bet in the game. They were 5, 6, 7 point favorite or something like that. And they were winning legitimately with about 3 minutes to go by 14 points. There was no need for anything to be done in the game, and Houston was going to win, cover the spread, and Pittsburgh scored a touchdown to bring it down to 7. Then Pittsburgh tried an onside kick because they're losing by 7. Now there's 2 minutes left in the game. Out of timeouts where Houston's going to run out the clock. and the ball traveled 10 yards. I've got the newspaper clippings to justify it too. The ball traveled the 10 yards. The referees blew through the flag. The ball didn't travel the necessary 10 yards, awarded the ball to Houston, taking no chances of a miraculous comeback by Pittsburgh. Houston ran out the clock and won by 7. And the newspaper headlines, everything, called it a very erroneous call.
Interesting.
So, they're,
Speaking of erroneous calls and things along the lines of what you've just explained to us, how much, if at all anything, would you be willing to acknowledge in that supporting something that I heard about you taking a polygraph test once upon a time, a number of years ago, about with questions posed about your knowledge of various fixes on a particular game?
I have taken a polygraph test.
Yes.
I'm in possession of it. I was asked 4 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Did I work with a major magazine show?
Mm-hmm.
Were they given the games prior?
Yes.
Were the games reported to the FBI? And were the phone calls taped? I answered all 4 questions, and the polygraph firm came with their conclusion on the bottom of the statement that all answers were truthful.
Interesting. Who asked for the polygraph test, if I may ask you?
One of the major networks.
So it's either ABC, NBC, or CBS, or
Very good summation.
Okay, but you want to keep it sort of discreet.
I reported, with me, I'm not the type of guy that's waving the flag. I'm not heroic or anything else. I looked at this situation where this was a situation where how can I make money on it?
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm looking at.
Sure.
They want to throw a game, let them throw a game. What do I care? They caught me at a time that, my first bet was $200-300. Let's say it's chunk change. What am I going to do? First, I haven't got concrete proof that they are fixing games. Secondly, they gave me 1 game. If they give me 10 games throughout the season, what am I going to make? Couple $1,000s. I knew somebody in Chicago in law enforcement, it wasn't Don, by the way, and he referred me to somebody in the city I was in, who was very high up in the FBI.
I see.
And he says, use my name, call him up. I called him up, I gave him the scenario. We sat down, I told him the story, I says, I'm in this for the funds. You guys put your case together. Oh, we'll take care of you and everything. Well, at that time, I was very gullible. I gave him 1 game on the Tuesday, game 1. That was that Pittsburgh-Houston game. I gave him another game. And then the 4th game, I called them up and I said, they told me to bet whether it was Kansas City or St. Louis. I don't remember right now. They were playing each other. And I called them back Thursday. I said, John, they told me to get off of the game, lose the juice, whatever. There's been a change of referees. I says, this is going to solidify what I'm telling you, because there's no way that I would know a referee got sick and it's not going to make us a signed game. Yeah, it looks great and everything. Never heard a thing from them, what they were doing. And came and he threw me $100 for the information. Very generous of our government. So I said, to hell with this. I said, let me take a shot at what I know. And I went and contacted one of the biggest magazine shows on television at the time. you can take your options. It could have been Dateline, it could have been 60 Minutes, it could have been, one, it was one of them, let's put it like that,
Sure.
2020. And I got the senior producer, and he told him the story, and he says, we got a hell of a story, he says, if you can prove it. He says, I'm gonna send one of my top-notch producers out there with a camera team, and we'll discuss it. Well, he sent his top-notch producer out there with the camera team, and we discussed it, and they heard the story, and this producer wasn't top-notch, was probably the second best producer in the industry. Everybody else was tied for first. So this producer talked me into taping the conversation with the guy giving me the game, with the FBI, and the FBI can tape people, but you don't tape the FBI. I mean, it's a one-way street.
Well, occasionally,
No, it's a one-way street.
the recently retired mayor of Chicago, Mayor Daley, did strike a deal
Oh,
with the
did he?
FBI to have a
Well, he struck-
stenographer.
He struck a deal. We're talking without their knowledge.
Well, I didn't mean that he struck a deal to get out of some kind of an indictment. I
Right.
never suggested that the mayor did anything wrong, but
Well,
he did have a tape meeting or recorded meeting with the FBI, but it's a very rare occurrence,
Right.
I would agree with you.
Well, this producer got back to New York, and their attorneys got frantic about taping the Bureau.
I see.
Unbeknown to them, you don't tape the Bureau.
Right,
And,
not especially,
no,
not unbeknown to them.
and they turned out, they didn't want to get involved in the show. But meanwhile, for the next 3-4 weeks, I did get calls on Friday, what's the game of the week? Because some of their senior correspondents I guess had to get their wagers in before Sunday,
Yeah,
so they
of course.
didn't want to miss this. Then I let it sit for a while, and I called up the National Enquirer and the Star newspaper, and I got Rupert Murdoch's right-hand man.
Remember that person's name?
Yes, I do, and I don't mind because he was, I admired him quite.
And who is he?
His name was Malcolm Abrams.
Mm.
Malcolm Abrams was from England, transferred to New York, and headed up the Star newspaper and
I see.
tabloid.
Gotcha.
And he got all excited about the story and flew me to New York. And we sat down and talked, and he gave me a retainer for the story. And we signed a non-disclosure where I gave him, I forgot whether it was 21 days or 30 days. He gave me a retainer. If you decide not to run the story after 30 days, I keep the retainer, everything's mine, and so on and so forth. They're out of the picture. Well, Malcolm came to me in 30 days, said, keep the retainer. We haven't got the slightest doubt that you're telling the truth. But we've got a situation here. Unless we could absolutely prove it, when you point your finger at a group of 10 people or less, without absolute proof, you're open.
The
leaving
liabilities
yourself-
are
yeah.
greater. I would
Libel
imagine,
and
yes.
slander suits
Sure,
will be
sure.
flying. So,
Yes.
it was dropped, we went our own way, I kept in touch with Malcolm, called him up to say hello and everything. And I was back in Chicago and I tried one more network.
Mm.
And they loved the story, they sent me for the polygraph test first. Everything proved that I was telling the truth. And they started working on it. Of course, in a period of 2.5 years, they filed with the government a minimum of 5 times under the Freedom of Information Act. And the government sent them their pat letter.
Mm.
We cannot release any information because we have an ongoing investigation.
Oh, sure.
So now, as it turned out, after all these years, there was a number of investigative reporters from various areas working on the same case. And we started, I had two great investigative reporters. I think they were probably the best in the industry as far as I'm concerned. And they did win in their journalism career, which they cut real short. They retired in their middle 30s. But they did win either 5 or 6 Peabody Awards. That's unheard of.
It's impressive.
That's who was working with me. They were the ones that disclosed the fire code violations when the MGM fire hotel burned in Vegas, 86 deaths and everything. So they were real good, and they started working with other agencies and other investigative reporters, and they were trading information back and forth. And one reporter gave us maybe about 180 pages of a pen register. Now, do you know what a pen register is?
I believe so.
Okay, pen register is just the opposite of a wiretap.
Yes.
Wiretap, you're recording the conversation.
Mhm.
Pen register, you're recording the outgoing calls, the times, how long they were on the phone, and there was a little summation of everybody, and it all led back to one person who was very high up in the government, who was was running for a governmental office, had a lot of mob connections, also had a lot of connections with college, got records of him calling two of the biggest college coaches in the industry at 12:34 a.m. Duration of the call, 1 minute and 20 seconds. You think he might have been telling him who's going to win tomorrow? I don't know. I mean, it's an awful short conversation.
Interesting question. Are you familiar with some of these experiences that Mr. Harvey's
The pen
experienced?
registers and that's,
And you've know about a lot of this stuff.
I've heard,
Do you, now, I don't know if I've ever met anyone who would probably be as great of a judge of character as you are, given your career with doing what you've been doing or were doing with the Chicago Police for as many years as you were, based on your knowledge of what Mr. Harvey's experiences were and things that you've observed and read or heard. Do you believe what Mr. Harvey's telling you?
I remember when he first told me about this, and if you're gonna lie, you're gonna screw up. You can't tell the same lie over and over again. But he's come up with the same information every time, and it's in my opinion, he's a very honest individual. Aside from doing some
Things
things,
that
but
the illegal gaming, you don't.
everybody that's involved with football anyway, your average bettor, if they lose the game, it was fixed, or somebody's crooked, or he missed a field goal on purpose.
Yes.
If you lose the game, all it's.
Has this man ever lied to you?
I never caught him lying to me, no.
Do you believe that he has ever lied to you?
No, he would have no reason to lie.
Yes.
In fact, well, if he was booking after the time I busted him, and I would ask him, are you still in business? And if he said no, I would have to believe him, but it could have been yes, I don't know, I don't.
Did you ever lie to Don?
No.
No.
I'm not suggesting that you.
No.
I'm trying to establish what I believe is your credibility.
No,
as
because I
good
think
credibility.
we had a great relationship.
Yes.
I trusted him. He gave me some very good advice, which was off the record, and the advice was just get out of the business. Then you've got too good a background.
Going back now, speaking of your background, you're Jewish, are you
Yes.
not? And are there a lot of Jewish Chicago outfit associates? I mean, There have been some over the years.
In the bookmaking industry?
Yes.
Yes, there are.
Any that you care to name that have already been in the newspapers?
No, it's,
Mhm.
I mean, you know, bookmaking was a way of life. I'm very biased in it because my feeling is it's, unless somebody gets over their head and starts with the Juice Boys and the Shylocks and so on and so forth,
Yes,
it's a way of life. People bet.
sure.
And
Did you ever have any dealings with people like Lenny Patrick?
yeah,
Gangsters like Lenny Patrick?
I knew him. My situation was completely different than 90% of the people. Because, and I'm not bragging,
Mhm.
but I think I was probably one of the best phone men in the history of Chicago.
He was.
You know,
I could,
thank you for mentioning that. Please finish, I don't want to
Yeah.
interrupt that.
I could work for 3 bookmakers, take their complete book,
Mhm.
and do all 3 of them at the same time. I had 3 phones in front of me. The bookmakers, the mob outfit guys and everything, they knew my talents and they wanted to keep me clean.
Mhm.
They didn't want to leave me open for arrest and everything.
Sure,
So I didn't meet the customers. The customer was a number to me.
yes.
I mean, I may have had 5 or 6 of my own customers,
Mhm.
but when I work for Patrick's people, or I work for this one or that one, Harvey, here's a list of numbers from 100 to 160. That's all I needed.
And what is your, I heard your name mentioned in connection with the over-under.
I was probably the original
The original what?
one to ever put an over and under out.
Is that right? About when was that?
I can
What
tell
year?
you exactly when it was. It was 1968. The game was the Dodgers and the Cardinals in baseball, and the pitchers were Bob Gibson, and if I'm not mistaken, Bob Gibson and Don Drysdale.
Interesting.
And it was a very well-known entertainer that used to bet with me.
Would you tell the audience what an over-under is? I know that all
An over and
the
under is-
experienced bettors know. but-
Is a number that they put out, which is an accumulative score of both teams together. And it was 1968, and there was only one game televised each week in those days. It was the Monday night NBC Game of the Week. And this particular entertainer was performing in Reno. And every time he performed in Reno, he would call me up. I was managing a legitimate race book, licensed by the state. And he'd call me up and, Harv, what's the line on the game? He'd make a bet anywhere from $100 to $300 or something like that. I'd send a runner over to pick up the money from him because there were no phone accounts in those days. And he called me up that day and he says, Harv, what's the line on the game? And I said, so-and-so. I says, the Dodgers are $1.40 favored, which means you lay $7 to win $5, or 140 to win 100. And he's sitting there and I hear dead silence on the phone. His exact words were, he says, Jesus Christ, he says, that's the toughest game I ever heard of in my life. He says, I'll tell you what. He says, you make me a number and I'll bet you that they score more or less points. Or more or less runs. And, I mean, this was unheard of in those days. And I says, well, leave me think about it. I says, you promise me it's not gonna be for more than $300. And for a lark, you can have it. Call me in a half an hour. And in those days, I mean, I looked through all the figures. The average scoring game was 7, 7.5. I made him a 5.5 on the game. And he called me back and he chuckled. He says, all right. He says, can I bet 300 on the game? I says, providing you give 11 to 10. All right, he says, I want 330 under 5.5. The pitchers were Bob Gibson, like I say, in Drysdale. Gibson was just finishing setting a record for scoreless consecutive innings. And he won the game 3-1. We started, people started talking about it, and we started slowly, where we would put up a number on the Monday night game so people can bet parlays, team and total, and it became very popular. Then this moved down to Vegas. Vegas heard about it. We were in Reno. There's a sports book in Vegas. It was Bill Dark, sports book in North Las Vegas. And he started putting up totals, and all of a sudden it blossomed and it ballooned.
Very impressive story.
And now there's totals everywhere.
Sure, sure. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take this time to let you know that Mr. Harvey and Mr. Herion are presently discussing things with the American News Post about ideas that we're looking at in terms of furthering some of the stories and experiences of Mr. Harvey, and we're very, very pleased about this. And on that note, Mr. Harvey, would it be okay to end here and move forward in the next several days discussing various ideas and plan a direction and where we could go from here? Are you interested in those conversations?
That would be fine.
Thank you.
But let me interject one thing.
Yes.
I still believe to this day,
Yes.
and they may be isolated areas, and I've had other situations.
Yes.
It's not narrowed down to that, but that was the major one that we talked about. I still believe that there is situations, there always will be situations where the sports game is not on the up and up.
You know, now that you've mentioned it, and I just about closed the show, but this begs for a little bit of a continuation. What are your thoughts on the most recent Super Bowl? I know there's been a lot of talk about the Broncos and the loss. I think the sports viewers out there would really love to hear someone as experienced as you share some insight on the Broncos performance.
Put it like this, I turned to my girlfriend who was watching her first Super Bowl with me. She's in her 70s, yet never viewed a Super Bowl. I made a bet on the Super Bowl that I've won for 5 consecutive years. And I got up and screamed, and I says, I can't believe it. I says, I lost the damn bet in 6 seconds. But I made a bet that there is no score in the game in the first 6.5 minutes. And traditionally, they run the ball, they start out very cautious. And here, that situation with Peyton Manning. Now, Peyton Manning, I don't know. Look, it's nerves, it's whatever. But Peyton Manning's experienced. Peyton Manning runs around behind the line and audibilizes and changes plays and looks at the defense and everything else. There's no reason for a center who worked with Peyton Manning for the whole year and knows his MO to be centering the ball when Peyton Manning isn't behind the center. I mean, it was the first play of the game.
Yes.
I was happy. They got the kickoff on the 10-yard line. I says, even if they drive downfield with the running plays and the short passes, they're not going to score. They have to go too far. And needless to say, So, but I'm a recreational bettor now.
Good for you.
I find a couple big games throughout the year. I may bet the World Series of poker, but let me tell you, not poker, a World Series in baseball. Well, let me tell you one funny story, which really soured me on betting sports. And it's not the football story, but it was 1982. And I was a part-time poker dealer in Vegas. I dealt the World Series of poker and everything else. And I'm dealing a poker game in Vegas at the MGM Grand. And it happened to be at the time when the celebrity golf tournament was going on. So here's my table. Two unknown people. Arnold Palmer was playing there. Sparky Anderson was in the game, and a couple others. And I come off of my break, and typical, I'm walking in from the sports book with all my sheets. Sparky Anderson wins a hand. Harv, he says, "You're involved in sports?" I says, "Sparky, I bet anything that walks or crawls." Well, he says, "I'm not going to give you a tip on this hand I just won." And he gets up and he walks into the sports book and he comes back and he buys me a $10 ticket on the big red machine to win the World Series, which they did win that year. But there was also somebody sitting in the game, a heavyset gentleman in his late 50s at the time, and looked like the typical character from out of Damon Runyon with the flashy clothes and all the gold and everything.
Sure.
And we started talking after the game had broke down. He says, "How knowledgeable are you in sports?" I says, "I consider myself pretty knowledgeable." "Why?" He says, "I need somebody in Vegas, and I'm going to give you a chance to make yourself a lot of money. Can we sit down and talk?" I says, "Yeah." So after I got off work, we went to a coffee shop, and he says to me, "I'm a bookmaker." He says, "But I've got one customer I can't beat. It's impossible for me to win." I says, "There's no such animal." He says, "Yes, there is." He says, "I've got a customer." He says, "I'm not going to tell you his name." He says, "But he's a very large name coach in college basketball." He says he's going to win every game on his team. He says when his team's a big favorite, if he wants to cover the spread, he's going to leave the starting team in there for the whole duration. If he wants to win it close and he wants to win it by the spread, he's going to put the second or third string team in there. He says, "So you just follow my lead if you want to do it." And he says, "I'm going to give you $500 advance just for the labor. I'm going to call you once or twice a week." And he says, "When the team plays, you give me a lot of payphone numbers. I'm going to tell you how much on the game. You're going to have the money in front. When I go back home, I'm going to wire you out money." And he says, "You just bet these games." He says, "Because I'm not worried. I beat this coach in baseball and football. I get all my money back. But I want to get rid of his winning bets." So I said to him, I says, "Well, it all sounds well and good." I says, "But I'm not running around for $500. I says, "I'd like to know who you're talking about." And he did tell me the coach. And I can tell you that this is the top 5 coaches in the history of college basketball. This coach was well up there.
Interesting.
And the funny part of the story was that he gave me the $500. He went back home. He was going to wire me out some money. I had his number. I called him up. I called him up for a year. He never answered the phone. And I came back to Chicago. I was booking football. I said, "Well, let me check again." I called information. I got somebody with the same last name. Called him up. It was him. I says, this is Harvey, I got $500 a year. He says, when are we gonna start with the basketball? And he started laughing. He says, keep the 500. He says, you wouldn't believe the story. He says, I went back to where I live, and he says, the feds were waiting for me, pinched me, I had a case, I did 18 months, and I'm out of the business. And
He's reformed.
I don't know if he's reformed or not, but he lives in Vegas now and plays a lot of high-limit poker.
Very nice story. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to come to a close. For those of you who have an interest in some of Mr. Harvey's history and other sports-related things, why don't you go ahead and send us some questions, and we'll pass them on to Mr. Harvey and see how he feels about answering them. Mr. Herion, always a pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you. Mr.
Joe,
Harvey?
it's been fun.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Very good. One thing, with that over and under thing in baseball.
Yes.
There were people that would pay, people who would go to Wrigley Field, as an example, to see which way the flags were blowing. If they were blowing out Wrigley Field, there'd be a lot of home runs probably, so the over would be up.
Is that right?
Oh, this is
Very
very,
interesting.
Yeah.
We can still apply that theory to today's
Oh, yeah, sure,
bets
sure.
and things.
overs and unders are very weather
Uh-huh.
influenced.
But you know,
Good to know.
the key to that, like he started all that, is you're making a parlay.
Is it?
They both have to win, you
I
know.
see, sure.
So once you
If
start.
you're making the parlay, you don't
Yeah.
have to make a
No,
parlay.
you don't have.
Well,
Most offices want you to bet a number of things and not
Here's
just
the-
an over-under.
here's the proof of the pudding, and we're a knowledgeable sports bettor.
Mhm.
You go into Vegas, and I defy you to do this, it doesn't matter what hotel you go to. Bigger hotel is gonna have higher limits. You walk into, say, a Bellagio, and you ask them what the limits are in the game. The Bellagio will tell you, we take $100,000 on a side, which means, a side means a team. But our limits are 10,000 on the total. So what are they telling you? They're telling you that we don't want to take the money from the knowledgeable total bettors because it's too prevalent with the weather, they're too influenced. When it's raining and it showers, everybody thinks, oh, the weather's inclement, it's good for the under. It's not true.
It's good for the over.
No. I know you're not gonna know this. It's good for the under when they're playing on a natural grass field, because the field gets soggy. If they're playing on artificial turf, where the receiver goes out and cuts, the defender slips, it's good for the over. A lot of open receivers.
I see.
And it's wind dominated in baseball. It's wind dominated in football, because you have certain teams, half the game, a team is going from east to west.
Interesting.
Going into the wind, they're not throwing.
Yes.
So they're running the ball, running the ball, running the ball, and
Well-
using up the clock.
Those of you listening, pay attention, take notes, this is good information. I really don't need it, I don't gamble, but I do find it interesting. On occasion, when I do make it to Nevada, I may place a bet, but thank you. That's
In
the
the old
truth.
days, I'd say, save the airfare, give me the bet.
And we're only promoting legalized gambling. Those of you who are taking some of the tips that this professional gambler is sharing with you, remember, do not call a bookmaker. Go to Nevada or online, do it legitimately. Thank you for your time today again, gentlemen.
That's not legit, by the way.
Well,
Online is not.
then do whatever it is legit,
Yeah.
whatever, I don't know all
Don't
of the
give
different
any
things.
more information.
We'll see you soon, likely next week.